Vice President.
Senator Mark, you have 36 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, I go to the bill directly now. And I refer to clause 2 of this bill. Again, I'm seeking clarification from the Honorable Minister of Finance on this matter. In the contribution of the Honorable Minister of National Security, reference was made to the governor or the central bank as it relates to the appointed date of this cancellation of the $100 notes. But, Mr. Vice President, if you look at clause 2 and we examine the new 27A, which has been inserted after section 27 of the Act, we are seeing, Mr. Vice President, where the Minister of Finance is directing the bank to cancel any note issued by it, given not less than 40 days' notice, and to consolidate the power of the Minister of Finance in this matter. You go to 27A subsection 5 or section 5, and you will see, Mr. Vice President, where the minister, by order, has the power to extend the date or the period in subsection 1 and 4 in any case. So the question that has to be asked, Mr. Vice President, is this: whilst we are in support of the measure, was it necessary for the Central Bank Act to be amended in the way it has been amended to give the Minister of Finance more power in relation to that of the governor and the board of directors or the board of the central bank, the members of the board of the central bank? There is a kind of airy kind of feeling I get whenever Christmas occurs or is coming. Central bank seem to have a very, very unfortunate experience. We remember, Mr. Vice President, the governor was dismissed around this time. And now we are sitting with a couple of days very close to Christmas. And you have an amendment to the Central Bank Act, Mr. Vice President, simply to cancel notes. But in canceling the notes, we are seeing an insertion of a new section in this Central Bank Act that has given the Minister of Finance more power over that of the governor. And the question that has to be asked, and I'm asking the Minister of Finance, was this amendment necessary in order for us to cancel these $100 notes? Couldn't the governor of the central bank advise the minister? Why did the minister, Mr. Vice President, have to insert 27A and arrogate unto himself new powers that he never had? So I am asking these questions, Mr. Vice President, because we are seeing a situation where the central bank is being gradually and almost imperceptibly being, its power that is, being eroded. So, Mr. Vice President, if you go to 27A, subsection 5, you have a minister, Mr. Vice President, and I want to ask again of the minister. The minister, by order, he's not only going to extend the date, but he's going to consider where it is appropriate to do so. And, Mr. Vice President, you would see under the section that deals with $90,000, where the minister again has the sole discretion. So if you go to clause 4, you will see under the financial obligations regulations, where the minister in question has the power to determine what the prescribed amount of monies will be or should be. In the current legislation, Parliament has that oversight role. Parliament now has, in this law, a clear and certain and specific number or figure. In this amendment that we have here before us, Mr. Vice President, that is now being given to the Minister of Finance. And, Mr. Vice President, should a politician, I'm asking, should a politician be the one entrusted with that power to determine by order the prescribed amount? Or should that not be the power given to some independent body? Because when you have politicians involved in matters like these, any number can play. And it doesn't matter, Mr. Vice President, if it is a PNM or UNC. I believe that we must have safeguards as it relates to the rights and freedoms that people enjoy in this country. And Mr. Vice President, why I ask the Minister of Finance? I would like to ask the Minister of Finance, why is the appointed date being kept a secret? And why is the Minister of Finance, who has arrogated unto himself this power to determine the amount prescribed national security, why are we giving the Minister of National Security that power? Why? Why? Mr. Vice President, that was not in the financial obligations regulations before. So what you have taken place now is you have an insertion of the Minister of Finance in the central bank, deeper tentacles of the Minister of Finance into the operations of the central bank. And then, Mr. Vice President, on the other hand, you have the Minister of National Security under the financial obligations regulations dealing with this matter. Why are we Minister of Finance? Why are we, Mr. Vice President, giving this Minister of Finance the power? He has the power to direct the bank to cancel any note. He never had that power before.
Here's what I found on the web.
Yes, Vice President. You need to exit the chamber and turn off the phone and then come back. Continue, Senator.
Yes, so Mr. Vice President, as I said, these are clarification that I'm seeking from the Honorable Minister. Mr. Vice President, there are some questions I would like to raise. There is this matter of, there are people, as some of my colleagues have indicated, who save at home and they have amassed large sums. I saw in the Express of yesterday's date, where the Honorable Minister of National Security is alluding and stating that when these criminals come out of their holes, they'll have to explain where they got all this money from. So, Mr. Vice President, innocent people can be caught up in this whole web that the government is establishing. And we haven't seen anything so far to provide them with any protection. Mr. Vice President, if you are not aware, let me advise you that there are many businesses that keep large cash balances for payroll operations and other contingencies. The question that I wish to pose, how are these persons to be treated? Is this to be treated as black money when they go to the banks? Because it seems like there's going to be a system established here where Big Brother would be looking over you. I am getting the impression from the Minister of National Security that the banks are going to be working in collusion with the government. I'm getting that impression. So when you go to deposit your money, because the minister has said in an article in yesterday's Express, Mr. Vice President, the minister has said that when those criminals come to deposit or exchange, they will have to explain where this money came from. Who are they going to explain to, Mr. Vice President? Who? Is it the minister or is it the bank? To the bank. So you have to explain. And then the bank now, because of the FIU, will proceed. Mr. Vice President, I'm saying that these are very important issues that we are seeking clarification on. Now, Mr. Vice President, I sought, and I didn't get very far. I sought to get from the Honorable Minister of Finance how much money, how many $100 bills have we ordered? And all I can get from the Honorable Minister of Finance is that there is an adequate supply. An adequate supply. Now, Mr. Vice President, I do not know why this lady who wants to go to church, she's committing sins every time.
No, it's not Senator Mark.
All right. Okay.
That is a little bit
Sorry.
You withdraw? Continue.
But may I ask for your protection, sir? From the Honorable, from this...
From bench.
Yeah, from the Honorable Minister.
Yes.
From the Honorable
Continue your contribution. Good.
But I'm seeking your protection, right? Yes. Yeah, good. Oh, yeah. So, Mr. Vice President, I was asking the Honorable Minister, if he could have provided us in the Parliament with an appreciation of, one, he has told us $8 billion. We understand that. But what he has not told us as yet, and I'm asking him for another time, how much has been ordered in order to deal with that $8 billion? That is it. Mr. Vice President, the reason why I raised this, there's something called the money supply. There's something called the money supply. And if this government, Mr. Vice President, and I'm not saying they are, I'm simply asking questions, because this is why this issue is so important. Can the government, Mr. Vice President, order more monies that can the government order more than is required? In other words, Mr. Vice President, I'm asking the question that the government says $8 billion exists in the system in $100 notes. But let's assume that the government orders $10 billion. That's why I'm asking the Honorable Minister of Finance to help us. Let us know what you have ordered, Mr. Vice President. No, I'm not saying you're going to print excess supply. I'm just asking for clarification, Mr. Vice President. So, Mr. Vice President, these are issues that I think that the population would like to know, because I know that this government is running on fumes. The country is running on fumes at this time. And we don't know. We don't know what the government is up to. We don't know. So I'm just asking questions so that the government could try to clarify for us. Mr. Vice President. So there are several issues that we have raised, my colleague has raised, and we would hope, Mr. Vice President, that in moving forward, that the government claimed that they have studied this properly, that they have all the data, they have done the research, and therefore everything is okay in going forward. We as parliamentarians have been left almost without any information from the government. We have had to scramble to do research as best as we could. The government has been planning this exercise for months. We have been told that they have had all the experts at their disposal. They have had all the information at their disposal. But, Mr. Vice President, the government has not been able to share with us in this parliament the information. So we have no data. We have no data. We don't have we do not have the privilege of the research that was conducted. Senator Timol asked the question about the impact studies that have been done, because there's upside and downside. There are costs and there are benefits, Mr. Vice President. There are pros and cons. The government would have done all that work. And it is almost like an obligation on the part of the government to provide the parliament with the kind of research and data that they would have been able to gather so that we can make a more informed and intelligent contribution to this debate. But we have had to be on our own. While the government and so on, the government has been able to get all the expert advice over the last 8 to 10 months, and they rush us here in less than 24 hours to debate a bill that they claim, and I have to assume that they know what they are speaking about. The Honorable Minister talk about counterfeit notes, which we say, if that is so, we support. But you know, I read an article or a story in the newspapers yesterday from the former director of the FIU. And she was asked, Mr. Vice President, whether this new $100 note, polymer note, whether it has anything to do with counterfeit notes. And the answer was no. So I don't know. I don't know, Mr. Vice President. No, it's not me. I'm talking about the newspapers. Sought an opinion as to whether this particular matter that we are dealing with, that we are being told the centerpiece of it is counterfeit, is narcotics, is illegal arms, and all sorts of things. They may be, those things may be true, but I'm saying persons who worked in that area of the FIU, they had a different perspective. And Mr. Vice President, if I may remind you, the Minister of National Security said one thing. The central bank said another thing about this whole exercise. So again, there's public misinformation, there's miscommunication. People don't know what is the real purpose behind what we are dealing with. But we all recognize, Mr. Vice President, that if there is a problem in this society with monies being washed and bleached and $1 notes being transformed into $100 bills, and it is infiltrating the system, we know that is a matter that all of us ought to be concerned about. So obviously, and so on, we can identify with that. And hence the reason, so on, we have said that on this side of the House and on this bench, we will identify with the measure that is before this Honorable House today. But we are asking questions. We are seeking some clarifications on what is before us as well. So, Mr. Vice President, I think that the government has to do its work. We have to do ours. We have given the government the necessary support, and we look forward to a smooth transition. But we know from our experience, and we know, Mr. Vice President, from what has happened in many countries that we have mentioned already, that there has been challenges, there has been difficulties, there has been some chaos in the rolling out of this particular demonetization policy, and we are hoping that Trinidad and Tobago does not replicate the chaos that took place in Ghana, in the Soviet Union, in North Korea, in Argentina, in Venezuela. We are hoping that what the government has told us is the gospel. They have done their homework, they have planned this thing properly, and therefore everything is in place. And we expect a smooth transition. We don't expect no chaos between now and Christmas. We expect, for instance, Mr. Vice President, a smooth transition. I think Senator Obika raised the matter about pensioners. And I just want to echo this point to the Honorable Minister of Finance, because there are thousands and thousands of pensioners who would have been receiving their monies on a monthly basis. Many of them and so on save it, Mr. Vice President, at home. It may be 10,000, it may be 15,000, it may be 20,000. Whatever it is, they would save. They would save their monies. But the question here is that we are seeking to give these same pensioners we have this appointed date, and the Minister of National Security made it very clear a short while ago. When that time comes and we give the country this window of opportunity, 14 days, please go and get your money changed. Don't wait. Don't wait. You know how Trinidadians are. And he went on a whole long exercise telling us, Mr. Vice President, get your house in order. I just want to ask the Minister of Finance to consider the elderly, the pensioners, and do what is possible to ensure that they do not experience any unnecessary sacrifice, burden, or suffering. So I want to ask the Honorable Minister to consider that, because I know that is an area that will affect the elderly in a very serious way. So with these few words, Mr. Vice President, I want to thank you for allowing me to speak on this issue, and we look forward to the government clarifying some of these points, and we also look forward to a smooth transition from this particular situation of the old notes, $100 notes, to the new polymer notes. We want it to work. We want the whole process to be successful. And we want, for instance, Mr. Vice President, that at the end of the day, nobody would be disadvantaged, particularly legitimate citizens. I'm not talking about criminals. I'm not talking about bandits. I'm not talking about drug lords. I am talking about legitimate citizens, and I want to ensure that these people get justice and fair play at the end of the day. I thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Senator Vera.
Thank you. Let me start, first of all, through you, Mr. Vice President, to give a warm welcome to the Honorable Minister of Finance. It's always a pleasure when he joins us. I also want to make two declarations. In his presentation, the Minister of National Security addressed many of my initial questions and concerns. So I want to acknowledge his good intentions, and I also recognize that he comes from a background of very prominent bankers in his family, so he knows his onions. But the minister will also appreciate that when we press for answers and we interrogate, it's not personal or political, but to clarify things, to put things on record, and to make good law. You know, I follow the Clinton philosophy: trust, but verify. So, and it's through the cut and thrust of these questions that will assure ordinary citizens that we're not sleeping on the job, that we're not just rubber stamps. You know, it's what will give comfort to the population that the laws that are being made here are being made in a responsible and good fashion. My second declaration concerns a warning from my wife. Every time a money bill comes up, she warns me, she cautions me about speaking on these bills, because as she rightly points out, I have no head for money, figures and financial details, and I cannot disagree. Never mind that this is the same person who has put me in an awkward position recently, of which I shall speak shortly, as it has bearing on the legislation under consideration. I hear you. So consistent with the advice of she who must be obeyed, I will not be asserting any positions in my contribution. Rather, I will content myself with asking questions and making observations. All right, so the pointed issue. We were coming back from a trip in Europe at the end of summer this year. And so we had caused a transit through Heathrow Airport in London. So as is customary, one gets up very early in the wee hours of the morning in order to catch the early flight to take you on your return journey home. And by the time you get into Heathrow, you're knackered. And when I'm in that position, I need coffee, like Senator Dayal Singh. So my loving and thoughtful wife gives me, and I have permission of the Vice President to show it, this £5 note to get an espresso. The lines are long. People are hustling. And when I reach up at the counter and I place my order, the clerk refuses to accept my money. Yes, very polite, very respectful. But she points out that this is no longer valid currency. So there I am, feeling shame and embarrassed. And I can't get my coffee because I have to go back now and get a credit card and go back to the line, right? I felt cheated. Because even though it was a note that my wife had kept from our last trip to London in 2007, I paid hard-earned money for this. Right? I didn't get this for free. I wasn't trying to swindle anybody. We had gotten that money legitimately. Yeah? But they moved the goalpost when I wasn't looking. I felt deprived of my property, that it had been taken away from me unfairly and unreasonably. And so, like other senators and members of civil society, I wonder how this legislation will impact those Trinis and others abroad who keep modest amounts of cash for when they visit or passing through Trinidad and Tobago. We will wait to see how they will be dealt with under Section 27A. And the underbanked. Now, I want to make this point. We have an underbanked sector in this country. There are a lot of people who cannot get access to open bank accounts. And even those who have bank accounts are finding that the banks are not interested in dealing with you face to face. They don't encourage you to come into the banks. They want you to do internet banking. They want you to use their terminals. They're pushing all kinds of things, but they're moving away from physical banking. I have a brother who works for Capital One. They have no physical buildings in which they operate because they say that the overheads are way too high and you employ too much staff. And I think that is a direction in which the banks are moving. So it is against that background I want to say we have to consider those who have old notes at home and who may miss the short window of opportunity given to exchange them. We have to consider those who are underbanked, those like the poor. And what about all those Venezuelans and expats who, for one reason or another, cannot open a bank account? We have already heard about those in the Muslim community who don't have bank accounts because it goes against the principles of the Quran and their injunction, the religious prohibition against the imposition or use of interest. So while I recognize that from a technical point of view, this legislation does not require a 3/5 majority, when you consider the actual impact, is it not unreasonable to question whether or not the effect of this might be to deprive some persons of their right to property, a right protected under the Constitution? I just pose a question. Now, I understand the need for demonetization, the importance of tackling the scourges of money laundering, fraud, tax evasion. And I recognize that demonetization has occurred here in Trinidad and Tobago in the past, seamlessly, no problem. In fact, it wasn't too long ago we took the 1 cent coin out of circulation. Huh? And apart from Colin Lucas, whose song Dollar Wine now has been affected because one of the compass points for the whining has been taken away, by and large, the country has not suffered. My research reveals that there are numerous advantages to demonetization, including getting fake currency out of circulation, better tax collection, paving the way to digital currency, stopping fraudsters, reducing illegal activities, and even controlling inflation. These are all laudable goals, and I support them. But I suspect that there is a lot as well going on behind the scenes that are driving this process. We already have on record from the Honorable Minister of Finance that he is playing a supportive role on this legislation. And the Minister of National Security has confirmed that this is all driven by national security interests. The very fact that we are called out to debate this on a Saturday at very short notice suggests that there may be a little bit more in the, is it more in the motor than in the pestle? Yeah. In any event, it's quite clear that this bill has more to do with crime fighting than monetary and fiscal policy and the usual conservative, measured approach that would normally be taken by central bank. So we have to take this legislation on trust. Right? The minister can't give us specifics. The minister can't say the appointed date or the timing. And yet, although the Ministry of National Security is driving this process, not central bank, when time comes to get the questions, we are told, well, central bank is going to be responsible for doing the implementation and all of the follow-through. So I feel as though something is eluding me. And as we know, the secrecy provisions in the Central Bank Act prevents persons from speaking about or revealing matters relating to the affairs of the bank. So we may never get the full story, the full perspective from central bank, and what, if any, advice might have been given to the government. And this may be important because in 2016, when India's Prime Minister Modi demonetized all 500 and 1,000 notes, which accounted for 86% of the currency in circulation, he failed to heed the Reserve Bank of India's skepticism about the government's claims about demonetization, curbing dirty black money, and counterfeit currency. He ignored warnings from the bank that there could be a hit on economic growth and the negative impact it might have on people's transaction behavior. And in the event, demonetization did disrupt life and economic activity in India. And more significantly, the policy actually failed to attain any of its stated goals. So there is this Indian case study that we can look at as a precedent, even if we may never learn fully from the Minister of National Security or the central bank what is really driving, what is the real impetus behind this legislation. I would still urge government, as far as possible, assure citizens they have a right to know, they have an interest in knowing why these measures are being implemented. And that ultimately, the inconvenience that we are going to suffer will pale in significance to the benefits we hope to reap. So I echo concerns about how this may impact, as heard by the other senators and other sectors of the society. And in fact, someone sent me a WhatsApp this morning asking me to inquire about the situation of old grannies who would have their savings in their mattresses to pay for home medical care, and what, if any, provisions were being put in place for them to replace their old money. A lot of elderly patients are asking this question. And as many of us, if the impact date is imminent, can we accept, time will tell, I suppose, on whether this is negatively going to impact the Christmas season, a time when merchants are trying to make up as many sales as possible, so in order just to break even. My hope is that the central bank will implement this after Carnival, at a time when things are less frantic or hectic in the commercial sector. Now, I know government means well. It has set its sights on tackling serious crime, white-collar crime. This is necessary and important legislation. I accept that. But equally necessary and equally important is the need for balance and harmony within our financial sector. Now, permit me to share 3 cautionary tales impacting on this bill, but I suppose you could take them as cautionary tales in the broader sense as well. Great plans, all well intended, that went awry. The first one relates to the ship called the Vasa. Now, visitors to Sweden are taken to this maritime museum where to visit this famous ship, the mightiest warship of its time. It had 64 bronze cannon, 2 gun decks, a 450-man crew, 550 pounds of shot. And when it sailed out on its maiden voyage on the 10th of August, 1628, it did not get far. First little breeze hit the sails, the ship toppled over, and it sank. Why? Couldn't carry the weight of all that was packed on it. The king was determined to assert his powers, his country's powers. He kept interfering with the shipbuilders' plans. He kept fiddling with measurements and demanding modifications, and he didn't listen to his advisors. And so the result was an unmitigated disaster. A second tale. This concerns the Tsar bell at the great bell tower at the Kremlin. In 1733, the Empress Anne ordered the casting of the world's largest bell. But before its ornamentation was completed, a fire broke out and the bell came crashing down. The bell never rang. It didn't ring once, and it remained where it fell for over a century. This bell weighed over 445,000 pounds. It was over 20 feet tall. It was over 22 feet wide, and it had a thickness of 24 inches. A beautiful masterpiece in bronze decorated with images of angels, plants, saints, and life-size images of the Tsar and the Empress. But all for naught, because the necessary foundations had not been laid. The necessary supporting structures were not in place. I would not like to see demonetization backfire or come crashing down because, for example, our banks did not have sufficient time to recalibrate their ATMs or their cash dispensing machines. And again, the third tale, we talked about it earlier, the problems faced by Indian Prime Minister Modi in November 2016 after his well-intentioned but ultimately misplaced demonetization efforts failed to deliver as promised. Now, I have some other concerns before I wrap up. Section 27A. Now, I am wondering, we've heard how this changes the current dynamic, because now the bank will have to act on the directions of the minister, whereas previously the bank made the call. Now the minister can make a call. How does this gel with Section 3 of the Central Bank Act, which says that the bank shall have as its purpose, blah, 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 the exclusive right to issue and redeem currency notes and coin in Trinidad and Tobago? Right? So I think there's a little bit of an inconsistency there, and I won't belabor the point about the practical difficulties where you have both the minister calling for the redemption of notes on the one hand, and I don't want to say trespassing, but now having a parallel right with the bank to make calls. Section 55(3)(c) of the Proceeds of Crime. Now, what this says, we are deleting the words $90,000 or such other amount as. So the section will now read that basically the minister will have the right, the minister will now have the right to prescribe the amounts. But it's already in the legislation. The legislation says that the minister has the power to prescribe other amounts. So why remove the benchmark of the $90,000? Now we have no benchmark. We have no sort of baseline to measure. Yeah? At clause 4, I think there's a typo here. It says the Financial Intelligence Unit of Trinidad and Tobago Act is amended. But I don't think that that's correct. I think what we're looking at here is the Proceeds of Crime, Financial Obligation Regulations, Regulation 11(1)B. Well, I looked at the at least the online version on the updated laws of the Financial Intelligence Unit Act, and I didn't see that as gelling at all. So that is something we could check. Again, I come back, why delete the benchmark of $90,000? It would have been simpler to just add, or such other amount as the minister may by order prescribe. Right? Again, we're hearing about counterfeiting. Have we ever had any convictions or prosecutions for counterfeiting? It seems like we've given up on that. So what we do is we're going to just change the currency. I think if we're going to be serious about tackling this type of crime, we need to beef up our enforcement procedures. Anyway, to conclude, time will tell whether this is a good or bad initiative. Right? I am not an economist. I'm not versed in monetary and fiscal policy. I'm not versed in these kinds of operations. And so I have to accept in good faith that the government has, as it said, thought this thing through fully. Not just in terms of its intended objectives, but also in terms of treating with unintended consequences. Right? We can only ask questions and make observations, and I appreciate the opportunity to have been able to do so. I thank you.
Senator Dayal Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, for allowing me to partake in this bill and act to amend the Proceeds of Crime Act, Chapter 11.27, and the Central Bank Act, Chapter 79.02. Mr. Vice President, as I come here on a Saturday, I noticed, I heard some hesitancy from, I think it was Senator Saddam Hussein was mentioning the fact that it was a Saturday, and then, happy to be here. Okay, I thought I got that hesitancy, and then I actually heard Senator Choud mention that it's unusual that we meet on Saturdays. It's only on certain situations that we meet on Saturdays. But I must say, while other members may be happy to be here, I was a bit sad. I was feeling a bit blue, to come to discuss these blue notes. I was feeling blue in the sense that, because Chaucer was the one who first said in 1385, I think, when in a complaint to Mars, he mentioned the word blue and connotated it with, put it together with sadness. So I'm a bit sad, because today was really my shopping day for my children. I was supposed to go, they had given me a list of things they wanted and the prices. So we had, certain video games, certain things, and it was really earmarked to do this. And thank God, I would have been able to go and do my shopping with my credit card or my check. But yes, I could have done that with that. But you see, Mr. Vice President, there's a shopping list that certain people will have that they really cannot use credit card or check. And I was privy to a shopping list. And I just wanted to go through this list with you. It's cash only. A handgun, $9,000, a Glock 17. A AK rifle, $30,000. A grenade, $15,000 to $20,000. 1 kilo of cocaine, $26,000. This is a shopping list that people pay cash for in Trinidad and Tobago. These are figures that are out there, and I'm sure the Minister of National Security knows that. So this shopping list that exists is what I think we have to go after. This shopping list, I think this piece of legislation is trying to starve individuals from being able to pay cash to get these items which cause havoc in our society. So I would have to commend the government for bringing legislation which could curb the circulation of cash down there in the community, which could actually be used to get these weapons that are in Trinidad, and it's cash only. So somehow we have to look at this part of the underground economy, the fact that we have to know what we are up against. We want a safer place, and if this legislation will help us get rid of those, I would support this. You see, we have what you call the shadow economy, as people mentioned, persons mentioned before, the shadow economy, the harmful effect of it. And I too, Mr. Vice President, when I was a young doctor, I now came out, I went for a home visit to a home in El Socorro. And it was an elderly lady, and I charged $200 for the home visit. I don't know what's the going rate now. And as I went there to see this lady, the house wasn't any sort of a house that, a lot of wealth you could have seen. Small house, not any great sort of furniture, expensive things. And what I was shocked as, the grandson came and opened a cupboard and gave me my $200. But in that cupboard, there were stacks of $100 bills. So what I'm saying, that was a shock to me to know what was going on. And I realized that now he's deceased now, the guy. So obviously, when you look at that stack and you look at what's going on there, things occur out there that, that we have to be aware of, and we have to learn how to curb these things. And I just wanted to quote something, Mr. Vice President, because looking at the shadow economies, looking at the hidden economy, looking at the economy that exists out there with that cash flow, that a lot of illicit gains, I want to just quote the IMF Working Paper 2017. And it's an article, Shadow Economies Around the World, What We Did Learn. And the author is Leonardo Medina and Frederick Snyder. And from this paper, we learned that there are what you call the shadow underground economy. And the whole gist of it is really, they say that, it's really avoidance for paying taxes and social security combinations, for avoiding government bureaucracy, burden, regulatory framework, hiding money. And what they said, the largest shadow economies existed in Zimbabwe, 60% of the GDP, and Bolivia, 62.3% of the GDP. And the smallest shadow economies was Austria, 8.9%, and Switzerland, 7.2%. Trinidad average GDP accounted for by our shadow economy, according to this, in between 1991 and 2015, was 34.3%. So 34.37%, sorry. So therefore, this article continue that the disadvantage of the underground economy is losses to legitimate industries who can't compete with lower cost of illegal operations, are not counted in government stats. As a result, they say the country, may underestimate their GDP. So there's a list of things where they call the shadow, the black economy. I think the Minister of Finance somehow I got the hesitancy. He didn't want to say it was black money or white money, but I think the term dirty money. Yes, so some people use different connotations. But whatever it is, the money is dirty money. And my problem is this. I also heard the Minister of National Security mention that if we could somehow, with this action that is going on now, if this will allow that money to come back into the mainstream economy, it will stimulate the economy. But that's dirty money. That's money got from human trafficking of 15-year-old and drugs. I don't care for that money to come back into our economy. I rather that money go like dead money. Those individuals who use it, who have that hidden, who have that buried, that money should just go, disappear, loss of profit to them. I don't care for that to really come back into our economy. And you see, persons have had money buried. I remember there was a video, Mr. Vice President, a video where it showed, I think the name of the video really was, it was a video on the life of Dolce D. And it is in YouTube. And if you look at that video, they actually showed you the whole history. And after he was imprisoned and he was executed, they actually dug up crocus bags filled with money in his property in Piparo. And you see, so those are things we know exist, and these are things we have to try to stop. So let us say an individual like that, Nankisun Butram was his name, had this money there, he would have had now to somehow hurriedly try to get that money back into the mainstream. And this is where I think we could use this haste, because I looked at the haste, and people mentioned, what is the haste? The 14 days. But you see, the haste I look at is, if we really took time to announce this, we may not have had the effect. Right now, we have people out there might be nervous, might be struggling, might be in a situation, how are we going to get that money? And I'm thinking, how are we going to get that money into the mainstream? And I'm thinking, the haste, people may have objected to it. I found it was a bit fast. I find it was a bit unfair to certain people, but I understand what the government may be trying to do. You see, it comes like you're fighting this industry. You're fighting a war against criminals. You're fighting a war against people who are bringing in these things. And it comes like, it reminds me of a show I saw, The Empire Strikes Back. So we have to strike back as quickly as possible, as fast as possible, and when the needs mean, fight back in such a way that we can actually use the essence of time where you will destabilize the other side. So, all well and good, be it that way. I think the government has already pushed its hands there in that position, and they cannot withdraw it. They have to go towards that 14 days, else they would lose the benefit that they would have acquired. So, Mr. Vice President, drugs, guns, human trafficking, all this has actually eaten away at the social fabric of our society. And this bill, I think, seeks to try to see if we can get certain people out of the woodwork. But getting them out of the woodwork is just one thing. Because as Senator Timal said, the situation may come the norm next few months, next few years, where they just exchange the paper, the cotton, for the polymer. So the same individuals, unless we catch them now trying to get that money into the circulation, unless we have that effort that we could monitor them and actually red flag them, I think the situation will be an exchange, and we will be back into the similar situation where polymer will exist. And if I'm hiding money in a crocus bag, fungus, mold could get it. Polymer, Mr. Vice President, could last longer. So let's say next 3 years, people decide to bury crocus bags of the new note. They can bury it for a longer period. Right? So, yeah. And it will be safe. No sort of chance of deteriorating. So we are giving them a banknote that they could.
Underground money?
Yes, well underground money. It could be deteriorating. And you see, Mr. Vice President, we were just from the United Nations Parliamentary Committee where we met for the last 2 days, where we looked at the United Nations specific developmental goals. And in that, I think the Honorable Speaker of the House actually tried to get a declaration and a commitment from members and different parliamentarians to see if we can adopt strategies to help the goals, the 17 goals. And one of it really was pollution and waste and whatnot. And then I wanted to know, is the polymer bill a more environmental friendly bill than the paper bill? Because we made a declaration, and as parliamentarians, we actually made a commitment that we would go towards that. So I'm wondering if there was any sort of consultation looking at this bill to see would it be more friendly to the environment as we were trying to do. But then I looked at an article by Christine Metamoras in 16th or the 5th, 2018, Plastic versus Paper, which banknotes are greener? And I must say, this article, they actually compared it. And in this article, they found that polymer banknotes, which are made from plastic, were first introduced in Australia in 1988 and are now used in more than 30 countries. And they said if the new polymer banknotes are made from plastic, and they're more harmful to the environment than paper ones. So that was a topic of debate that came in there. Are we putting in plastic which would be more harmful to the environment? But, Mr. Vice President, looking at this aspect of the banknotes, I mean, it has already been introduced with us with a $50 banknote that we had in the last central government, governor of the central banks launching that banknote. And I'm thinking, when I compare this note to that note, Mr. Vice President, I must say I was a little disappointed. Because, you see, the $50 note, I don't know if many people know about it. We won a prize for that, you know. We actually had a prize where they looked at and in 2014, they looked at notes all over the world, and the newest note that was launched, they found that the Jawala note was actually a beautiful piece of art. And it's just my opinion. When I compare the two notes, I find the new one is a little plain. It's lacking in that artistic, comparison. It's just my artistic point of view. Good. Yeah. Yeah. And even when that note, pretty note, but even when that $50 bill came, Mr. Vice President, there were a lot of conspiracy theories, you know. Yes, people looked at the face of the lady there and said it was a devil and a she-devil, and it caused a lot of theories here. And I must say, Mr. Vice President, something as a banknote would have caused all that problems then. But I just wanted to draw one reference, Mr. Vice President. We know the Muslim community, certain people there actually said it is haram. It is, they don't like to put money into banks. So there is some religious, already a little dispute. They don't like that. But there's the Muslim Credit Union, which exists. So there are avenues. But do you know, Mr. Vice President, and I want just to let the other side know, just to prepare them, that in this same article I quoted, Plastic versus Paper by Christina Matamoros, they actually had a dispute where vegans, after discovering animal fat in the new polymer banknotes, religious groups complained to the Bank of England that they didn't want to use their money, that money. So they said it was not vegan friendly. So what I'm saying, you may have disputes from different organizations, from different people, and you may have to be prepared on the other side if somebody asks, does this banknote contain animal fat? And you may have to, I don't know if any vegan group here will make some objection, but this happened in the UK. This happened in the UK, so I'm just preparing you just in case, because it seems that anything happens, people will make objections. So it is there. It happened in the UK. So going on, Mr. Vice President, I would like to say that there are advantages of the polymer note, and as I'm saying, it's here, and I'm saying the use of it, the replacement of it, I see the need. Now, I would like to just mention something, Mr. Vice President. The Minister of National Security said, cash is king. He said there's a haste in actually bringing this bill. And I'm saying, members had mentioned that certain people will be left out. Certain people will be left in the cold. Certain people like pensioners, persons who will keep their money under their mattress. I have patients who are hoarders. I had a patient recently, when their father died and they were cleaning their house, they found a whole stack of money in that house. We have to be prepared for that. And I'm saying that somehow, even though it's a cutoff period, I'm thinking the central bank should still have a mechanism in place on a case-by-case basis if persons come to them after. Not with a whole set of money, because the whole idea of this is to prevent people from coming in with a large sum of money. But if on a case-by-case basis, the central bank can have a department, because I know if you have a central bank check and it is expired, you can still go into the central bank and they will look at it and reissue one. In a similar way, I'm thinking we should have that mechanism still open, whereby if someone finds his money from his father's house, or some persons may be cleaning up and find money elsewhere. Mr. Vice President, I was cleaning my house about a month ago, and in a shoe, I found $1,200. I don't know. I mean, I was lucky. It was money I didn't know, but I had stacked that away. To pay a contractor. So I'm saying, no, it was in a cupboard. So I'm saying, this piece of legislation is forcing me now to clean my house from top to bottom to make sure I have no excess money hanging around. Yeah. So what I'm saying is, if perchance someone finds a small amount of money, I'm still thinking allow them to go to the central bank, explain themselves, and at least not, and you see the central bank will be the body that will see it's not a pattern. It's not like somebody going to the bank and a whole set of money. So still have that level there available for persons to come in. Mr. Vice President, there's also the fact that we have to understand that certain banks may have certain customers, and if they are trying to put in that money quickly, they may accommodate them also. So we have to know that, that if you really want to catch certain individuals, we may have to look at the banking industry also and see how, they look at the customers and see who's bringing in money more than 90,000. And I remember when Miss Alison West was appointed by this in the Senate, people out there in the business community said, this lady will look at all our laws, and no businessman could hide money and sneak money, because she knows from the private aspect how we can, how people will want to hide money. So as I say, you are there, people praised you, and I think the fact that you are there from the private industry coming in, I think, when we have thinkers like that, at least it's a way to look at following the money, a way of looking at how persons may want to hide their money, businessmen may want to launder their money, So at least the fact is, this present legislation also follows along that track. We hit hard, the empire strikes back, we get at those individuals, and we cause that disarray. But one aspect I might want to say, Mr. Vice President, is the fact that when we are looking at the aspect of being able to look at the $90,000, you know, given that power to the minister now to say that, you know, the $90,000, you know, he can change it on whim and fancy. So this is something I looked at. Why would the government want to look at that $90,000, and why would they want to have that change? And I suspect probably another attack could be if tomorrow the government decides, listen, well, or next week, we are lowering it from 90,000 to 50,000. They may be able to widen their net to catch persons coming in now. And, you know, so at least we got people with their pants down. Now we're going to catch them a little easier. So this may be a means where the government may not raise the limit from 90 onward, but could lower it in a temporary basis where you could see if people are rushing to get their money in, you can probably get them in. Get that, you know, if you lower it to 50,000, get those people coming in, watch them, and then afterwards, if you want, you can raise it back. So this may be, I'm speculating, Mr. Vice President, that this may be another aspect where, you know, the government may decide, let's see if we can look at that $90,000 and play around with it to see if we can widen that net. So, Mr. Vice President, as I looked at the demonetization in different countries, I want to quote the Asian Journal of Economics, Business and Accounting. And in this article, it was the 12th of the 2nd, 2019, they looked at demonetization in India and evaluation. It's by author Russell and Sajid Hussain. And quite frankly, this article, even though people spoke about what happened in India and the ill effects of what happened in India, it did speak to the effect that other countries had the same concept. And they listed, Germany did it in 1923 to prevent inflation, and inflation fell. The USA did it in 1969 to resist black money, and they were successful. And this is what I'm thinking. We have to look at the success stories of the other countries and see how, you know, not just the negative, but the success stories to see, hey, this may be able to help us. They also looked at the UK in 1971, and they looked at, the UK did it to bring uniformity in currency, and it was again successful in the UK. In Ghana, they actually had it to control the black money, and in different countries, they mentioned a few countries here that try this. And I'm saying we had success in certain countries, and I'm thinking we have to look at the success stories and see how it could apply to us, because in our situation, in our country, we realize with the geographical location and the fact that we are a transshipment zone for drugs and other ill effects, we have to realize that I think this might be something that is needed here at this stage. So, Mr. Vice President, I'm saying soon I'm hoping the old money in crocus bags may be a thing of the past. I'm hoping that... Well, it'll last longer. It'll last longer. But you see, I looked at this situation. Let's say there's a new... let's say those so-called illicit gains businessmen, I want to say, would now be able to hide their money next 3 years. We can't go every 3 years and change the currency. You understand? We cannot change the currency every 3 years because it will be defeating the purpose. So this is the time now to put things in place, to earmark them, to red flag them. And this is why it had to be a sort of a effect between the Commissioner of Police, National Security, to look at these individuals who are rushing, develop systems in place where you could really, really target them, because we will miss the boat. And as I'm saying, I think this will return to the same situation next 2 years. So, Mr. Vice President, there's not much I want to say again, and I hope that, you know, we can look at this piece of legislation, do what we have to do, but still, please consider the fact that those individuals who may be left out, and I think the minister has the authority to look at those individuals, but I'm saying don't let it 3 months, make it longer. Somebody could find something in their home that their father left years ago, that is there. Somebody could, have little pieces of cash, and as Senator Vera said, the £5 is our money, is hard-earned money. So if I happen to look at my study and I find a $200, I would still like to say I could go to the central bank and say, listen, I don't have a pattern of getting a whole set of money, but I found $200. Still allow me to be able to change that money. It may be there. It may be, I forget about it. They may have patients with Alzheimer's who may just don't even know they have it. So still have that accommodation. Once it's not a lot of money, once you give a fair explanation to the central bank, I'm saying don't have a cutoff point of 3 months or even 7. Let it be there for small amounts that you can explain. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
For government business.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. And let me start off by thanking my colleagues in this House for the second time in my time and many of our time. For some of you the first time, for coming out on a matter of significance, a critical matter for the country. And the legislation before you sets out what we intend to do as a government. We've had a lot of issues raised, some of which I will address and some of which we'll address in the winding up. I want to say right away that we anticipated that somebody would raise a constitutional issue, and of course Senator Vieira did. And it took me right back to 2009, and the Canadian jurisdiction with a similar charter to our Constitution has always, the Supreme Court in Canada has always strongly defended, among the fundamental rights, that right to freedom of religion. It's one of the most defended. In fact, it's the defense of that right that led, for example, to the Sikhs being able to forego the turban and not wear helmets on motorcycles. It led to the same scenario of the Sikhs being able to wear the turban in the RCMP, and some far-reaching decisions of the Supreme Court in relation to freedom of religion. But in 2009, the Supreme Court was confronted with striking the balance between freedom of religion and this issue of public safety. By 2009, of course, we had come out of 9/11, and we had come out of a series of events relating to international terrorism. And Canada, like many jurisdictions, had been on heightened alert in terms of national security. And out of that requirement to improve national security, and in particular, to deal with the issue of identity theft, the province of Alberta made it mandatory for photographs to be on driver's licenses. Now, for us in Trinidad and Tobago, that is nothing strange. We are required to have our photographs on driver's licenses as well as other forms of identification. But in Alberta, where you have a very significant section of the population called the Hutterites, or the Hutteran Brethren of Wilson Colony, their religion do not allow them to be photographed. So when the province of Alberta introduced the requirement that driver's licenses must bear the photograph of the individual, the holder, it became a constitutional issue. Of course, it just so happened that the Hutterites are also a significant farming community, and they own a lot of vehicles, many of which have to be on the road for the purposes of agriculture. So this driver's license was critical to the conduct of their trade as farmers, but also absolutely necessary to be on the road. And now the requirement was that the driver's licenses bear photographs. And in 2009, in the decision of Alberta versus the Hutterian Brethren of Wilson Colony, and the citation is 2009 to SCR 567, the Supreme Court of Canada struck the balance between the requirements for national security and public safety and this fundamental right to freedom of religion, and held that in this case, as we often do when we apply Surat in Trinidad and Tobago, held the view that, one, the requirement for photo licenses was justified, it was reasonable. In this case, it was a fair prescription in law. And fourthly, it was linked to a requirement that individuals be able, there's an ability to identify an individual based on some unique identifier in relation to identity theft. So I say that to say that the right to property is, of course, a fundamental right in Trinidad and Tobago in our Constitution. But as with all the fundamental rights, it is not an absolute right. It is a right that individual could be deprived of pursuant to the law through due process. And we believe that while what we're doing is being done in a very tight timeline, we recognize that it would bring a tremendous change in the way people currently conduct their business. It would put pressure on the banks to make the change in the time required to do so. We believe that for the reasons outlined by the Minister of Finance, the Minister of National Security in support of the bill, that this is something that is justified, it is reasonable, it is required in dealing with this issue of money laundering, the proliferation of cash in criminal activity, the likelihood that criminals and other persons whose intentions are not necessarily in the best interest of the society are holding significant amounts of cash, and that cash is used to encourage criminal activity, perpetuate criminal activity, but it also represents a symbol to those who some people wish to attract into a life of crime. And it is not difficult to find justification in relation to this issue of money laundering. In several debates, I've resorted to the FIU reports, and in particular, the one for the period 2017 to 2018. And in the last report that has been published, the data demonstrates that from 2013 to 2018, the reports, the STRs and SARs in relation to suspicious transactions and suspicious activity doubled between 2013 and 2018, from 554 in 2013 and to 1,100 in 2018. And that demonstrates two things. One is a higher level of reporting, but most likely also a higher level of suspicious activities. And the second important piece of information in the 2018 report is one that startled a lot of us, and that is that the value of the 1,100 reports, STRs and SARs, was $22 billion, and a lot of us were startled, just as Senator Timal was just startled there. $22 billion in SARs and STRs. That is transactions which were actually completed in the financial systems and transactions which were stopped before they were completed. And just to explain that sometimes for the purpose of law enforcement being able to do what they have to do, the transactions are flagged and allowed to go through all the way to the end. And in some cases, the banking system would block the transactions from ever proceeding. And in that 22 billion, for the period October 2017 to 2018, 722 million were actually transactions in the banking system which went through. The bulk of it, of course, were transactions which were blocked. And a figure that we do not pay a lot of attention to, $142 million worth of transactions were actually related to attorneys at law. And that is in the FIU report of 2018. The report also flagged an increase, and I remember in a previous debate, tracking the movement of financing of terrorism, FT, and the exponential increase. And I said, one day we'd be in one of these houses talking about how financing of terrorism has taken money laundering in relation to tainted cash in the local banking system. So when we talk about having to deal with money laundering as one element of dealing with crime in the country, and having to deal with what the FIU tells us, it becomes very critical that we tackle this cash, because it is cash that fuels the crime, and crime fuels the flow of cash. I know that Senator Hussain talked about the power of the minister and whether we were compromising two senators, Senator Hussain and Senator Vieira, alluded to the interference with the independence of the central bank through the creation, I think it is Senator Vieira who talked about a parallel situation of the central bank being able to withdraw money from or demonetize, and a parallel system of the Minister of Finance having the power to give the directive. And it is not unusual. In fact, the structure of the central bank legislation, throughout the legislation, you see the legislation recognizing that the management of the monetary flow in the country requires an interplay between the central bank and the Minister of Finance. And you would see throughout approval or consultation the words used to demonstrate or to create that relationship between the minister and the central bank. But more importantly, this is obviously meant to give the minister the power to intervene in cases where it becomes very urgent. And in many cases, that information will come via the Ministry of National Security or the Minister of National Security, or through some agency of law enforcement. And it is not a power that a Minister of Finance will use. Somebody used the expression willy-nilly. It would be a power that would be grounded in some urgency in order to intervene in relation to the notes which are in circulation and the need to make changes in the flow of those notes. And of course, in Section 26, it is an involvement that already exists in the law, where the Minister of Finance is the one who makes the determination or gives the approval in relation to notes and coins and the denomination and the designs and so on that are in circulation. So we do not believe that it is something that is unusual. We believe that it is something that forms part of the current construct of the central bank legislation. And we believe that in the particular case in which it is intended to apply, that the minister should be given the power to act where there is urgency. I take note of Senator Timal's contribution in relation to the hoarding of cash, but also the reference to jewelry, cars, and business. And I make the point that the FIU already has regulations which govern jewelry, cars, car rentals, automotive dealerships, and so on. And if you go to the reports of the FIU, you would see the extent to which some of the SARs and STRs also have been in relation to those forms of businesses. You make the point, too, that the big players most likely conduct criminal activity in US dollars. We also recognize that, but as the Minister of National Security said, some of the trading across borders in relation to illegal activity would be conducted in foreign currency, but definitely what happens in the local environment and what gives rise to somebody or groups of people trying to deal with $22 billion in tainted transaction. A substantial amount of that would be done in TT currency. And when you go to the FIU report of 2018, you see that it is a small amount of transactions that are actually intercepted and stopped or allowed to go through for law enforcement purposes. A small amount is done in US transactions, and the bulk of what is happening in our local economy and reported to the FIU is really denominated in TT currency. So I thank you very much for your contributions. I thank you for all the suggestions that you have given. The government recognizes we brought you out on a Saturday, brought ourselves out on a Saturday, largely to deal with something that is critical, something that is urgent, something that is in the best interest of the economy, and something that, most importantly, is going to be an important part of what national security does in relation to this matter of money laundering. I thank you very much.
Minister of Finance.
Everything is a joke for you. Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Let me try my best to address a number of issues that have been raised by honorable senators opposite. Let me deal first with a matter raised by Senator Thompson IE with respect to what appeared to be an apparent typographical error in Clause 4 of the bill, in Clause 3 of the bill, where the Honorable Senator indicated that by removing the words "is $90,000 or such other amount as," it, I am paraphrasing here, it damaged the grammar to the extent that it cannot be read properly. I'm subject to correction if that is not what was said. Now, what I did was I went to the Proceeds of Crime Act myself. I found Section 55, 3C. I deleted the words "is 90,000 or such other amount is," and this is what remains. Is $90,000 or such other amount as. I took them out. And the words that remain will be as follows. Large transaction means a transaction, the value of which the minister may by order prescribe. So it seems it's okay. The as, the is, and the as. Sure. Certainly.
I did send a note to the head of CPC that it was not the wording, but the punctuation.
Punctuation?
Yes. So that I, where's the note I sent anyway? So that what I was advising is after transaction, we had a comma, the value of which the minister, comma, may by order prescribe. And the same thing, if you look at 27A6, you have with the approval of the minister enclosed in commas, and when you have it in 7, with the approval of the minister, it is not similarly enclosed. I sent a note to him, so I guess that, at the end of it.
I didn't get the memo.
Sorry.
So that it reads as follows. That unfortunately was not passed on to me. But it reads as follows. Large transaction means a transaction, the value of which the minister may by order prescribe. Yes, there are some commas that could have been there, but I don't think it changes. I'll have to ask for protection, I'll have to ask for protection. I don't think it changes the meaning of the clause. Okay. Thank you very much. Let me deal with something now that Senator Vera raised, and I want to thank Senator Vera. Vera really assisted us in this House today. Unfortunately, through some administrative error, which befuddles me. I don't understand it, but these things happen. apparently the file copy of the bill that was presented to the Honorable Vice President and to Honorable Senators has wrong words in it in Clause 4. And the bill that we debated last night, fortunately, when I was packing up my papers last night, I put away a copy of the bill that we debated last night. And I fortunately brought my bag with me, and it fortunately is still there. And it reads as follows: the financial obligations regulations, as you absolutely correctly said. For some reason, I don't know why, the wrong version was circulated. And what I asked them for proof, being a kind of a methodical person, I asked the Senate to provide proof of what is the real version of the bill, and they brought it for me, and it does say financial obligations regulations. So that resolves that issue. This is in Clause 4, Honorable Senators. It should not read, as is in the version that some of you have, you may all have. Well, I can't say.
All of us.
I am a guest here, so I can't say.
All of us.
But in the version that you have, Clause 4 would read as follows: the Financial Intelligence Unit of Trinidad and Tobago Act is amended in Regulation 11. That's not the bill that we debated and passed in the House last night. The one we debated and passed had this in it. Instead of, in Clause 4, the Financial Intelligence Unit of Trinidad and Tobago Act is amended, it had these words: the financial obligations regulations are amended. Okay? So I want financial obligations regulations should replace the words Financial Intelligence Unit of Trinidad and Tobago Act.
It's just
Okay?
replacing Intelligence Unit.
Of Trinidad and Tobago Act. Okay? And if you go to those regulations, you will see what Regulation 11 says, because it is extremely relevant that when you go to the financial obligations regulations, it deals with the one-off transaction. Let me read it for you. Where a financial institution or listed business undertakes a financial transaction pursuant to an agreement to form a business relationship, well, that's A, or B, as a one-off or occasional transaction of $90,000 or more. And that is the one that is going to be amended, because there was no power of the minister in those financial obligation regulations to change the amount. It was just a flat amount. So that, whereas in other aspects of related legislation, the minister does have the power to prescribe the amount. In this particular financial obligation regulation, it was just a straight amount of 90. So that is now going to be deleted and replaced by the amount prescribed by the minister under Section 55(3)(c) of the Act. And that is the same section that we just discussed, which would read as follows: that large transaction means a transaction the value of which the minister may by order prescribe. So what it means now is that a large transaction is no longer a flat sum of $90,000. It is now a transaction, the value of which the minister may, by order, prescribe. Okay? So I regret that that occurred, but I'm glad we found it. If Senator Vera had not raised it, we might have made a little mistake here this evening and might have caused a problem.
You'd have to come back.
No, we wouldn't have to come back. I just want to make it clear. You see, that is the point I was making. Some persons may have had the wrong version. The one that was emailed. Yeah.
The give way, you ask him to give way, and then he would either oblige or not oblige.
I didn't see it.
Huh?
I didn't see
I know. I'm just advising her.
Confusion. Apparently, some people have the correct one and some don't. Senator Ramey has a different bill from the one I have, so that people have to really check and see what they have to know what you're correcting.
Some people have to correct.
Thank you very much, Senator Ahi. That is the point I was making. Some members of the opposition so want to tell me that I'm wrong. That when I said some, I think I was correct. So some have the right version, some have the wrong version. But anyway, the point is, the correct version is Clause 4, the financial obligations regulations are amended in Regulation 11.1. Okay? All right. Let's move along now. I want to refer members. All right. I see you all are ready to go. So am I. Some members raised matters of law and constitutionality and legitimate expectation and the right to property. These are very important issues, and they were looked at in detail in India when they demonetized. And in fact, there were several challenges in the Supreme Court, High Court, etc. But by and large, the courts in India did not interfere with a policy decision of the government. So that even though this thing was tested in the courts in India, the view was that the court should not interfere in a policy decision. However, what we have done, looking at the case law and the type of challenges that came in terms of constitutional challenges and the right to property, what we have done is we've included important safeguards in this legislation. And I will tell you what these important safeguards are. And that will clear up something that Senator Mark brought up. And also other senators brought up these issues as to if somebody has the old bills and for one reason or another, the bank does not accept them, what are they supposed to do? Because it is their property. And Senator Vera also showed his old banknote. And just, I've known Senator Vera for a long time. And this is a strange coincidence. I had the same experience myself, where I had one of these old banknotes in England, and I went to buy a train ticket. I wouldn't accept it. And this was just a couple years after I had got the banknote. So it seems that the English changeover was done very, very quietly. A lot of people didn't know. And I'm sure there are a lot of people that still have the old English banknotes. But no, there are English banknotes, Mr. Vice President, through you. English banknotes issued about 10 years ago that are no longer legal tender. Believe it or not. So, yes, Senator Ayi. So if you have some old English pounds that you got 10 or 15 years ago, no. There is a silver lining. There is a silver lining. So when I was confronted with this problem in the United Kingdom, as what am I supposed to do with these banknotes that I bought them legitimately through a bank, and I went to England and I can't use them. What am I supposed to do with this? You can redeem them at a commercial bank in the United Kingdom. Even though many years have still elapsed, you can still redeem those old banknotes in a commercial bank in England. What you can't do is use them for legal tender to purchase goods and services. Mr. Vice President, I have been to Australia twice. I did go in 1995, so I might have some of the Australian dollars that the Honourable Senator is speaking about. I may very well have Australian dollars that I can't use. Who knows? I am afraid, Senator Ayi, I simply researched the English problem when Senator Vera brought it up. I haven't looked into Australia, but I just saying, Senator Vera, you can exchange those notes in a bank, but you can't do it, and I believe the post office as well, but you can't do it, you can't use it to buy something in a store. So that I understand all of the issues and problems that have arisen with that. Now, let me move on as well. And actually there is an article, I will just refer it to you. The newspaper is sometimes accused of being a tabloid. For those of us who have been to England, you may have heard about the Sun.
Yes.
You know,
Not the rising sun.
I see members really want to go home. but there is a newspaper in England called The Sun, and there's a particular article, and the question was asked, what happens to that old 10-pound note? When did the old 10-pound note expire? Can you still use them? And how do you exchange them now that they have been discontinued? And this is an article from the 4th of April, 2018 in the Sun newspaper in United Kingdom. You can Google it, and it tells you exactly what to do with those old UK pound notes. But coming back to the point I was making about constitutional arguments and the right to property and legitimate expectations and so on, to answer a question raised by Senator Mark, who really must be under the influence of the flu virus. She made a good point. In clause 2, the new 27A3, it's an absolute provision. This is what it says. The bank shall redeem at face value any specified notes which are presented for redemption prior to the appointed date. Now, this bank is not a commercial bank. This is the central bank. So where the word bank is used in capital letters in this bill, it means the central bank. What it means is that if you go to a commercial bank and they won't accept your money because maybe they have suspicions as to the origin, you can go to the central bank. And this compels the central bank to exchange the old notes for new notes, okay? So that you don't lose your property. What you might lose is your privacy, because you might have to explain where you get all this money from, okay? But I mean, at least this is an important safeguard that has been put into the legislation to make it crystal clear that anybody that presents one of these old paper notes to the central bank, the bank must redeem them and give them the new Parliament note, okay? The other safeguards that we have in here are the ability to extend the time, and that is in 27A5. The minister may by order extend the date or period in subsections 1 and 4 in any case or class of cases where he considers it appropriate to do so. And those periods are the date of cancellation, that's in subsection 1. So the minister may extend the date of cancellation, and the minister may also extend what I would refer to as the grace period that is created by clause 27A4 of the bill. Let me see if there are any other issues that I need to address. What I would ask honorable members to do in their spare time is go to the Financial Intelligence Unit website and look for guidance note on suspicious transactions, activity, reporting standards. And that is a document that was updated not too long ago, September 2019. You'll find it on the FIU website, and that gives guidelines on how to identify a suspicious transaction. And while I am not sure that I entirely agree with what Senator Obika was saying, that someone might come at $2,000, $3,000 and the bank teller might say, well, this person looking suspicious, and make a note. I'm not sure that happens. But there are guidelines here as to what is a suspicious transaction, and there are quite a few parameters and criteria in terms of what is a suspicious transaction, how to identify a suspicious transaction or suspicious activity, and they identify all the red flags. There's a particular section on financing of terrorism, but I'll move on from that to red flags pointing to money laundering, and I will just give some examples. The FIU guidance to the commercial banks, this is a red flag. The client cannot provide satisfactory evidence of identity. So the person comes into the bank with cash, but cannot produce a driver's permit, an ID card, a passport, or anything like that. So they can't properly identify themselves. That's a red flag. Situations where it is very difficult to verify customer information. The customer may give information that doesn't make any sense. Situations where the source of funds cannot be easily verified. The person say, well, I earned this from
Cutting grass.
pumpkin and bhaji. and it might be difficult. It might be difficult to, or I'm a fisherman. So it might be difficult because the pumpkin and bhaji might have been sold and eaten, and the fish might have been caught and so on. I don't need any assistance. So, transactions in which the parties are non-resident and their only purpose. I'll have to ask for protection. Transactions in which the parties are non-resident and their only purpose is a capital investment. They are not interested in living at the property they are buying. Frequent change of ownership of same property in unusually short time periods with no apparent business, economic or other legitimate reason between related persons. Client wants to resell property shortly after purchase at a significantly different purchase price without corresponding changes in market values in the same area. Client wishes to form or purchase a company whose corporate objective is irrelevant to the client's normal professional activities. Client sets up shell companies with nominee shareholders or directors. Client repeatedly changes attorneys within a short period of time. Client purchases property in the names of other persons or uses different names on offers to purchase. Client deposits large amounts of cash to make payments outside of the client's profile. Client negotiates a purchase but wants to record a lower value on documents, paying the difference under the table. Client's documents such as identification, statement of income, or employment details are provided by an intermediary. In other words, the person is not producing their identification documents themselves. Somebody else is saying, these are the person's documents. Transaction involves legal entities. There is no relationship seen between the transaction and the business activity of the buying company. Client requests the firm to act as his agent in obtaining some bankers' drafts, cashier's checks, and other cash equivalent or near cash monetary instruments, or in making wire transfers to and from other banks or financial institutions. That's called anonymity. Divergence from the type, volume, or frequency of transactions expected in the course of the business relationship. So that's just examples of what the FIU considers to be money laundering, and these are the red flags, that this is the guidance they give to the commercial banks, to the control units in the commercial banks. But however, in this bill, we have made it crystal clear that the central bank must accept and redeem the notes. Now, let me go to another point as to whether this is all unusual. Section 27 remains. In other words, the power of the central bank to demonetize remains unfettered. What we have added is a power of the minister to intervene. And really, it should be evident that in a case like this, which is driven by national security considerations, the bank cannot be expected to be the repository of national security information. I'm talking about the central bank. The central bank may have knowledge of counterfeiting. It may have knowledge of suspicious transactions, but it would not have in-depth knowledge of things like drug trafficking and so on. National security will have. So this is why, in addition to the normal power to demonetize, which is the purview of the bank, and they may wish to demonetize for all sorts of reasons, such as they want to change from paper to polymer. Polymer lasts longer. It costs more, but when you do a life cycle costing, it may end up costing less in the long run. You have to replace the paper bill every 2 or 3 years. The polymer bill is 7, 8 years. So when you have a higher capital investment, but you don't have to replace it as often. So the central bank can make a commercial decision that, look, I want to go to a polymer because in the long run it will cost me less. Or they may decide to do it for reasons of avoiding counterfeiting. It's much more difficult to counterfeit to forge a polymer bill than a paper bill. So those are all what I would call technical considerations which would flow from the central bank. But you may have a security implication, security initiative that the bank would not be reasonably expected. Sure, Senator Vera.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. I understand the thinking. It's just that the section speaks in addition to the powers of the bank under section 27. So you've confined yourself to 27. But I'm pointing out that when it comes to the redemption of banknotes, 36A, the bank may issue and redeem notes and coins. Section 3, the bank has the exclusive right. 21.2, bank has sole right to issue notes and coins. So you may find yourself in conflict with those other sections. That's all I'm drawing attention to. And the other thing is for me, this is the most potentially contentious aspect of the legislation, because the central bank has always jealously guarded its autonomy and independence. And while I recognize the delicate interplay and balance between central bank and Minister of Finance, and the need for consultation, for example, 35.2, 44D4 and 5 and Part 6, the relations with government. This seems to be now, even if you just say, all we are doing is canceling, you can't cancel and not have a knock-on effect on the issuance and redemption. So I'm just drawing that to your attention.
Right. I was coming to that. I hadn't finished the point I was making. I just want to make the point that there will be instances where the government has to drive the process for reasons of national security, such as this one. And you can't expect a central bank to have enough security information to make a decision, a reasonable decision, as to whether they should demonetize because they want to get rid of dirty money. So this is why this has been added. But I want to draw your attention, before I come to Section 3, I know that's where you want me to go. Before I reach Section 3, I want to draw your attention to the Bank of Jamaica Act. And in the Bank of Jamaica Act, in Section 16, 1, it says the bank shall have power on giving 3 months' notice in the Gazette to call in any notes and coins on payment of the face value thereof, and any such notes or coins with respect to which a notice has been given under this section shall, on the expiration of the notice, cease to be legal tender, but shall be redeemed by the bank upon such conditions as may be prescribed. That's very similar to our Section 27. So in the Bank of Jamaica Act, the bank has the power, by giving 3 months' notice, to call in any notes or coins on payment of the face value thereof, okay, demonetize. But in the Bank of Jamaica Act, it goes on to say, in 16 subsection 3, if the minister considers it necessary or expedient so to do, he may, by order published in the Gazette, direct that such notes and coins as may be specified in the order shall cease to be legal tender as from such date as may be specified in the order, not being less than 10 days from the date of publication in the Gazette. So in the Jamaica legislation, Central Bank Act, Bank of Jamaica Act, they have already had this provision for many, many years. In fact, when I look at the marginal note in the Bank of Jamaica Act, it's there since 1978. So since 1978, the Minister of Finance in Jamaica has had the power to direct that coins and notes be pulled from circulation with just 10 days' notice. So that what we are doing here is no different to what has obtained in Jamaica for a very, very long time, 41 years. So I just wanted to let you know, it's a parallel system. You would not expect a minister to just jump up one day and demonetize a currency on a whim. One would hope that a minister would not do that. It would be driven by something, such as a national security consideration. So we're simply harmonizing our law consistent with what is already in the Jamaican legislation. With respect to comment made about the former Financial Intelligence Unit head, Susan Francois, she actually said that the Parliament 100 bill is the way to go, and that is in the Newsday of yesterday, I believe, or today. She said that the Parliament 100 bill is the way to go, but one of the more important points she made was that it is more secure and harder to commit fraud through forgery, plus there is wear and tear in replacing the old notes, referring to the Parliament bill. What she was talking about in terms of forgery, she said there was no international pressure on Trinidad and Tobago to demonetize because of incidences internationally of forgery. But she concurred that the Parliament note is much harder to forge. So I just want to clear that up. Yes, I just wanted to clear that up. All right, I think I have covered everything. I think I have addressed everything. So at the end of the day, I just want to repeat that the bill that some members have received is the incorrect bill. The correct bill has financial obligations, regulations in it, and I would ask honorable senators to support this legislation. I beg to move.
Honorable Senators, the question is that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Proceeds of Crime Act, Chapter 1127, and the Central Bank Act, Chapter 7902, be now read a second time. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it.
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Proceeds of Crime Act, Chapter 1127, and the Central Bank Act, Chapter 7902.
Minister of Finance.
Let me be sharp enough to say the correct procedure. Mr. Vice President, I beg to move that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Proceeds of Crime Act, Chapter 1127, and the Central Bank Act, Chapter 7902, be read a third time and passed.
Honorable Senators, the question is.
I don't know what's going on here today, Mr. Vice President. I don't know what's going on. Mr. President, they still give me the wrong thing. No, that is the one that is considered in the committee of the whole. You give me the wrong thing, man. Clarence, man. No, I think it's because it's a Saturday. Everybody's tired. Everybody wants to go home. I think we're all a little cranky. So I would ask everybody to calm down, including myself. Okay? Mr. Vice President, in accordance with Standing Order 66-1, I beg to move that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Proceeds of Crime Act, Chapter 1127, and the Central Bank Act, Chapter 7902, be committed to a committee of the whole Senate forthwith to be considered clause by clause.
Honorable Senators, the question is that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Proceeds of Crime Act, Chapter 1127, and the Central Bank Act, Chapter 7902, be committed to a committee of the whole Senate forthwith to be considered clause by clause. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. The Senate shall now go into committee of the whole to consider the bill clause by clause. Honourable members, as you're well aware, the bill has 4 clauses in it, and there hasn't been any amendments, both in debate or otherwise. So I think for prudence and the fact that it's Saturday and everybody wants to go home, we'll take all clauses together. Right? Yeah, go ahead.
Clauses 1 to 4.
The question is that clauses 1 to 4 stand part of the bill. Honourable Senators, the question is that clauses 1 to 4 now stand part of the bill. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clauses 1 to 4 now stands part of the bill. Yeah. Honourable Senators, the question is that the bill be now reported to the Senate. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. The bill will now be reported to the Senate. Minister of Finance.
Just checking. Don't want to make another error. Mr. Vice President, I wish to report that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Proceeds of Crime Act, Chapter 1127, and the Central Bank Act, Chapter 7902, was considered in Committee of the Whole and approved without amendments. I now beg to move that the Senate agree with the committee's report.
Honorable Senators, the question is that this Senate agree with the committee's report on a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Proceeds of Crime Act, Chapter 1127, and the Central Bank Act, Chapter 7902. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Minister of Finance.
Again. Okay. Mr. Vice President, I beg to move that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Proceeds of Crime Act, Chapter 1127, and the Central Bank Act, Chapter 7902, be read a third time and pass.
Honorable Senators, the question is that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Proceeds of Crime Act, Chapter 1127, and the Central Bank Act, Chapter 7902, be now read a third time and passed. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it.
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Proceeds of Crime Act, Chapter 1127, and the Central Bank Act, Chapter 7902.
Acting Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Vice President, I beg to move that the Senate do now adjourn to Tuesday, December 10, 2019 at 1:30 p.m., at which time we would do the second reading of the Finance Bill 2019. Thank you.
Honorable Senators, the question is that this Senate do now adjourn to Tuesday, the 10th of December 2019 at 1:30 p.m. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. The Senate now stands adjourned to Tuesday, the 10th of December 2019 at 1:30 p.m.